Welcome to the Cento Leadership Table Podcast with myself, Brett Ennals, CEO of Cento Search. This week we're discussing with Ken Francis, CEO of Actuate, how you test for technical skills and competency in an interview situation. Okay, so today I'm here with Ken Francis, the CEO of Actuate. They produce video analytical software. And the question today for the Cento Leadership Table around interviewing styles is how you test at interview stage for technical skills and job competency. So again, Ken, when you're faced with a candidate, you're sitting across the table, how would you probe the individual for those sort of skill sets?
Well, I think to begin with, Brett, we have to recognize that a tech company like our own is hiring in several different functions. So we have an engineering team that's hiring software developers. We have a product team that's hiring product people, a data science team that is hiring data scientists, engineers. And if you're not already aware, the data science folks are probably closer to artists than they are engineers, and they're very creative people. And so it's a very different skill set that you're seeking. But even on the commercial side, the sales and sales engineering and kind of pre-sale design and tech support areas, the skill set gap is becoming much bigger than it ever was in the past. 20 years ago, everything was a piece of hardware. And technical skills was really defined on how well people knew that technology. Today, there's a whole bunch of software running on hardware, or there's no hardware at all, and it's just a whole bunch of software, or it's a whole bunch of cloud services, or it's a bunch of Kubernetes container services. It's just a whole different world in interviewing. So I think there's a couple of foundational things. First of all, years ago, we'd have 2 or 3 interviews with a candidate, and one would be with the person that's hiring the candidate, another one would be with HR, and another one might be with some other third-party function. And today, I can't afford to try to put every candidate in front of HR. No. The HR opinion just doesn't matter anymore. But I do want 3 sets of eyeballs and ears on the candidate, and I need them all to be from within the discipline. So for engineering, it's all 3 candidate interviews are with people from engineering leadership. The project management aspect of engineering is very different than the software coding part of the discipline. So we will identify who's going to interview a new candidate, and precisely what in technical development software skill set is being sought after. And there are quite a few that are out there. Whereas on the commercial side of the business, I might have a sales leadership interview, I might have a technical services interview, and I might bring in one of my engineering leaders, because when the conversation turns to things like APIs and SaaS, they're much more capable of understanding what that candidate's background really looks like. So a difference of different interviewers today, really important. The resume today can be so easily assembled by cutting and pasting things off the web.
Absolutely.
You can run it into, Chat GPT, and they can put together a completely beautiful resume that has nothing to do with what you're doing. And so you cannot count on a resume any longer.
No.
It has to be a really in-depth conversation. And the candidate has to be able to, first of all, provide examples of where they've used those skills and the code that they've written, or the API that they've integrated to, or the container they've built. And so it's a whole different interviewing process today.
Absolutely. And do you, we found, again, when interviewing technical people, they're not the best sales folk, obviously. So they might list their skill set, but digging into the weeds with technical people, and there's things that they've done, there's skills that they've got, but they've not necessarily put on their resume, and it's trying to pull those skills out of people that are not necessarily there to sell themselves, so to speak. Is there any techniques or even software or tools that you employ to try and find this information out from an individual that's sitting in front of you?
Sample code is the way to go. but you can't ask them for things that they've done in the past. You have to give them a use case and have them write the sample code in the language that you want them to write it in,
Yeah.
so that you can rest assured that they didn't just go out and take something off the web. And so testing is a critical part of hiring the right people on the engineering side.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, those same technical skills apply on the sales and commercial side. And I still believe in understanding an individual's level of awareness, because most people are not aware of kind of what's going on around them.
No.
One of my salesy kind of interview techniques is to get in any kind of situation where the candidate can be driving and I can pay attention to how they drive. This is kind of an analogy because I think there's a lot of different ways to do this. But what I want to do is I want to measure the candidate's physical attributes without them being aware that it's an interview candidate question.
Yes.
People can prepare themselves for any form of interview. They know what questions you're going to ask and they can get the best answer and have a canned response in front of them. But when I let a candidate drive somewhere and I can tell how aware they are, do they use their side mirrors, their rearview mirror? Do they go 2 miles an hour or 2 kilometers per hour over the posted speed limit? Or do they go 5 kilometers per hour under? All of that lends itself to measuring an individual's awareness of what's going on around them.
Yeah.
Now, that's not as applicable on the engineering side, but it's very, very applicable on the technical side of the sales and commercial role. And so any way that you, as an interviewer, can create a scenario where you can experience how the candidate thinks and how their just natural thought process interpret into decision making is really important. I use the selling driving experience, but there's many other ways to think about that. Customer success is a huge, huge thing in the SaaS world today.
Yeah.
And a successful customer success person does not think necessarily like an engineer, but has to be incredibly technically astute in order to determine whether the problem with the customer situation is product in nature, relationship in nature, or process in nature. And it's difficult to find process-oriented people that can fake it. I mean, if you're truly process-oriented, you can speak to process and how you deploy procedures.
Yeah.
And so I make a discussion around processes and procedure a big part of my interview with technical folks.
And is there many layers to your interview process? So do you have a standard sort of 3, 4, or even 5 step interview process with other members of the management team and the leadership team at Actuate?
It's so funny. I've worked for a bunch of big companies where you wanted 4 or 5 layers. Most of my startup companies experiences, and I've had 3 in my 35 years, coincidentally, all 3 of the gentlemen that I would work for in that kind of environment would tell you, don't bring in more layers. Handle the conversation yourself first. Make a very fast decision on whether or not this individual can be a productive member of the team. And if you feel like they can assuredly, then go ahead and proceed with the other interviews. If you question it, immediately back off and go find another candidate. There's just the time spent within the organization is just an enormous waste.
And so when you're looking at candidates, then do they have to hit a certain threshold of criteria to get to the next stage, or are you willing to look at someone that maybe is not the perfect candidate, that maybe hits 80% of the mark, that you can see the development opportunity in?
No, to be honest, I've got to get to 70 to 80% of the mark in the first interview.
Okay.
I think that's a tough decision for people to make. Particularly earlier stages of their career. They want to believe that everybody's going to be great, and that you can help develop them. And that's true. Once you get them hired, help develop them. But you should not start with a help development plan for a candidate into a role. They've got to be a good fit before
Yeah.
you proceed.
And if again, when we're coming back to the sort of commercial side, the technical side, is there any other tests and measures that you put in place to, because of course you have the most technical person in the world, but if they come into your business and culturally they don't fit, they could upset the whole apple cart. So is there anything else that you put into the process there?
Well, so I'm going to separate that between kind of technical testing versus kind of personality testing. So on the technical side, I'm hesitant to say, yes, here's a tool that we've used well, because the tool that I'm using is specific to a technology that I'm using that not all other companies use. And I'll use the example of Kubernetes. Kubernetes is a containerization technology that not everybody else uses. So we have a testing mechanism on that tool. But from a personality standpoint, I do not currently deploy a tool that measures their personality fit. I know that there are plenty out there,
Yeah.
but Actuate is relatively small. And so, being under 100-person organization, means that my gut feel, the gut feel of our engineering leader, the gut feel of our product leader, is the most important part. And it's really, really interesting because when engineers come in all kind of full of themselves and talking about how they can do things to change the business, that person is probably the least likely to be a good fit.
Yes.
The opposite is true when they come in and they're completely nerdy. The nerdiest technical person whose experience clearly shows that they have done things that they could be bragging about, but they're not, that person turns out to be the best fit. In a less than 100% organization, the culture is more like family,
Yeah.
and you're looking for, siblings that don't need to be in the spotlight all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your experience then in leadership in the security industry, where do you think a lot of people go wrong when they're interviewing for, technical skills and competency?
From the interviewer perspective or from the interviewee?
From the interviewer perspective, in your experience, where have you seen people how they've made mistakes?
I believe they go for the complete opposite type of fit. I think they look for the person who steps in and says, I can do all of this for the business and I can do it on my second day.
Yeah,
And I want the most money. And, I'm going to talk with 4 companies, and the one that offers me the most money, I'm going to apply myself to and help make them bigger and better. That is just absolutely the worst perspective that I can find in a candidate. Now, behind the scenes and with their family, they might be looking for the right compensation. There's nothing wrong with that. But for them to use that in an interview process to try to leverage a bigger offer is usually a bad sign or indication on who they are.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And with the candidates that you get through in various roles for Actuate, Actuate is a relatively new company. It's an exciting company, technology business. The ones that you don't hire, do you have a process of maybe letting them down gently, but keeping them interested so that they can maybe go away, retrain, and come back, looking to get back into the business?
I'll be very honest. I think what you're describing is something that big companies do pretty well because they got to find a way to keep their HR people busy. Um, and I say that a little tongue in cheek because I respect the premise behind it. But in a small company, 90% of the time that does not exist. In a
Mm,
small company, you thank them for interviewing. You might send them a note that you've selected someone else, but you don't try to stay in touch because you can spend so much time trying to stay in touch.
absolutely.
Don't get me wrong. There's some people out there that I still want to hire that I've been wanting to hire for years and I will stay in touch with, but not just the cold candidate that comes in that's not a good fit. I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time trying to keep a bridge there.
No. So do you do things like talent benching then? For you say you mentioned there's people out there you'd love to get into the business. You're keeping in contact with them and then just waiting for that right opportunity.
That's exactly right. Yes. And That bench, if you will, is probably somewhere between 10 and 20 names at any given time.
Yeah.
And when the bench gets too light, too small, I'll spend some time getting building the bench back up. Because when you do go looking for the right talent, you don't want it to take 3 to 6 or 9 months.
No.
You got to have 2 or 3 folks to talk to. If it doesn't work out, you can go through other processes. But generally speaking, I find very capable entrepreneurs have a bench that
Yeah.
is almost always ready to go.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a great strategy, without a doubt.
Yep.
Anyway, I really do, but I don't take up too much more of your time. I really do appreciate your input on this. And yeah, for anybody that's out there that doesn't understand Actuate, did you want to give us just a 5-minute pitch or a 5-second pitch of exactly what Actuate do?
Sure, absolutely. So Actuate, first of all, there are hundreds of companies coming into the market right now representing themselves as artificial intelligence on top of video surveillance. It's very, very common.
Yeah.
80%, 70% of those companies won't be around in 3 or 4 years because
No.
they don't know that they're spending so much money, so much cash chasing a big end user to buy their product. And that selling cycle is 2 to 3 years sometimes. And by the time they raise their head and realize how much money they've spent, it's almost impossible to figure out a business plan to where the revenue is going to exceed the cost that's already sunk.
Yeah.
And so they wind up selling the technology that they've started off to someone else or closing down shop. I've watched 3 such AI companies close down in the last 90 days. So Actuate is very specific. We focus on the video monitoring services. That can be a commercial professional monitoring software company, or it could be an end user that runs their own what's called security operations center and deploy their own employees to monitor their own products. But that's a very niche market segment within the physical security video surveillance space. It's less
Yeah.
than 1% of the total revenue of the space globally. And there's probably only 800 to 1,000 companies that focus on it around the world to do third-party monitoring for customers. So we are very specific, and we call it remote video guarding or remote video monitoring. So it's RVM or
Yeah.
RVG. And we believe that we are the best in that space. The company is 7 or 8 years old, and from a revenue standpoint, we're probably the largest in the space today. But that has a lot to do with the fact that we went global very early. So we have monitoring centers in, of course, North America, Latin America, Europe, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia, Japan. And we're kind of working with the biggest commercial companies that do remote video monitoring as a discipline.
Yeah. That's brilliant.
Yep. It's been my absolute pleasure to speak with you today, Brett. Thank you for inviting me to your show.
No, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.